Millsaps. Now we go to our last, with our joint meeting with FAMPO Policy Committee presentation on transit funding.
Hey, this is Todd Horsley from DRPT. Want to make sure you can hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right, we're good to go then. So, well, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Todd Horsley with the State Department of Public Transportation.
Mr. Horsley. Mr.
Yes.
Horsley, before you go, we first have to call the policy committee meeting to order, if you don't mind.
Sorry about that. I was anxious to start.
That's all right. And so just, I want to make sure that people know that we're now in session, so please be there. So as the chairman for the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, I'd like to call our meeting to order. Our first item of discussion is Mr. Horsley. Please go forward, sir.
Do you have to do roll call?
No, the roll call is actually third item, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, again, I'm Todd Horsley with the State Department of Rail and Public Transportation, or DRPT. I work in DRPT's Northern Virginia office in Alexandria. So anyway, want to thank everyone thank both GWRC and FAMPO for the invitation to discuss transit funding opportunities and the role that DRPT plays in funding transit programs and projects in the Commonwealth. Given some of the discussion, the robust discussion that's already taken place tonight, I fear my presentation may be a little anticlimactic, but hope you'll still find it informative, and we want to let you know that DRPT would be happy to participate in any future discussions on these topics that may take place as discussed in the GWRC meeting. I have around 10 slides to review with you. I'll move through them as efficiently as possible. I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have tonight, but if there's any I can't answer, then I'll get answers to you as soon as possible. And I'll defer to the chair as to whether she wants me to answer questions as they arise or wait until the end of the presentation. But
I would wait until the end of the presentation.
We'd both like you to do at the end of the presentation. It's that we have a dual chair right now, sir.
Okay, great, thank you. So, here you see DRPT's mission statement. All funding that DRPT provides or otherwise manages in some way should contribute to furthering our mission. In FY19, DRPT revised and rebranded our state grant programs as MERIT, which is an acronym for Making Efficient and Responsible Investments in Transit. We instituted a prioritization program for our prioritization process for our transit capital program that prioritizes state of good repair projects, and we transitioned to a 100% performance-based system for awarding our transit operating assistance. And just so you'll know, on average, state transit operating assistance covers around 20%, maybe a little bit more, of the typical transit system's operating costs. DRPT, we have a fully automated grant application and award system that we call OLGA. It's open for applications between December 1st and February 1st of each year. So we're quickly approaching the start of our FY22 grant cycle. We evaluate applications in February and March, and then publish our draft 6-year program in April, along with VDOT. At least we do that in a typical year. This one has been a very atypical year. We haven't actually published our FY21 SIP yet due to the COVID pandemic. Hopefully we will be able to make some decisions on that soon. But in a typical year, we would follow the CTB's public comment process and then take a final SIP to the CTB in June. And then we award grants on a fiscal year basis. So our state grant funding generally becomes available on July 1st, but federal funds that are controlled by DRPT may become available on October 1st, which is the start of the federal fiscal year. So next slide, please. This slide is a pretty comprehensive laundry list of state and federal funding programs that DRPT either awards itself or has some role in administering. The programs in green are those that GWRC is eligible to receive funding from, and I'll provide a summary of each of those programs in my remaining slides, along with an extra slide at the end of this presentation about the I-395, I-95 Commuter Choice Program that is managed by the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. The only program in green that I want, that I don't plan to cover is Smart Scale. I've attended your meetings long enough to know that you all are very knowledgeable of Smart Scale already, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. I just will remind you that transit projects are eligible for Smart Scale funding, and Smart Scale funding for transit projects are awarded and managed by DRPT instead of VDOT. Also not shown on this list is a new program that I just remembered this afternoon, actually, that DRPT will debut in FY22, and for which we're still working on our program guidance. The Transit Ridership Incentive Program, or TRIP, another acronym, was created by the General Assembly earlier this year. The legislative goals of the TRIP program are to promote improved transit service on routes of regional significance in urbanized areas of the Commonwealth that have a population of in excess of 100,000 people. And it's also to reduce barriers to transit use for low-income individuals. A portion of our TRIP funding will be used to support the establishment of programs to reduce the impact of fares on low-income individuals. And we'll provide more information on TRIP as it becomes available. But like I said, we're still developing program guidance for that. So next slide, please. So the three state grant programs on this slide are all awarded by DRPT. They're all competitive, statewide competitive programs. The demonstration project program is DRPT's innovation program. We look to fund research and innovation in the transit industry with this program, and we require that grantees share the results of their research or their other programs and projects that they use DRPT funding for. We also provide funding through this program for pilot transit routes and services that a transit system, may want to try out for a year before permanently adding it or establishing it within their system. And Fred Transit has actually used the demonstration program for this purpose in the past. The Technical Assistance Program supports planning and technical assistance activities related to public transportation and TDM, or Transportation Demand Management, feasibility studies, strategic plans. Those are examples of the types of projects that are funded by this program. And GWRC received technical assistance funding in FY18 for the Lafayette Boulevard Multimodal Transportation Study. And then finally, the Public Transportation Intern Program provides funding for one-year internships for college students interested in careers in the public transportation industry. Intern activities must be directly related to public transportation. DRPT requires progress reports from the interns and the grantees. So this is not a program just for organizations to hire temporary employees. The program actually has an excellent track record of interns going on to careers in the public transportation industry. PRTC has an established intern program, and they're a regular recipient of this program funding. So next slide. And now two DRPT programs that provide funding for transportation demand management and mobility programs around the state. And GWRC is already a regular recipient of funding from both of these programs. The TDM Operating Assistance Program funds the general day-to-day operations of commuter assistance programs. The goal of the program is to mitigate traffic congestion through the reduction of single occupant vehicle auto trips by shifting SOV trips over to carpools or van pools or to transit. Applicants must demonstrate that their program actively measures congestion mitigation outcomes. And unlike the State Transit Operating Assistance Program, prior award of funding does not guarantee future awards of funding. In FY20, GWRC received $310,662 in state funding to support the operation of the GW Ride Connect program. And then the Mobility Programs Assistance Grant Program is a competitive program that supports employer outreach, telework, and van pool transportation demand management programs. It is a results and outcomes focused grant program. And then applicants must demonstrate that their program or their project will achieve measurable congestion mitigation by reducing SOV trips. Then, like the state TDM Operating Assistance Program, prior award of funding does not guarantee the continuous or future award of funds. And then FY20 GWRC received $86,154 in state funding to support its Vanpool Connections program. So next slide. So next I'll describe two federal funding programs from which GWRC receives FTA funding, and I'll also talk about DRPT's role in these programs. So first is the Section 5303 Metropolitan Transportation Planning Program. Section 5303 is a formula-based program that provides funding and procedural requirements for multimodal transportation planning in metropolitan areas and states. Planning must follow the federal 3C approach, and so it has to be cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive, resulting in long and short range programs reflecting regional transportation investment priorities. So funded activities with this funding program are generally tasks described in your UPWP or your Unified Planning Work Program that support multimodal transportation planning. FTA funds are first apportioned to state DOTs by a formula. In Virginia, the DRPT serves as the state DOT for the purpose of apportioning FTA Section 5303 funding. DRPT allocates funding to MPOs in the Commonwealth based on a formula approved by both FTA and FHWA. VDOT provides a complementary planning funding from FHWA, and then DRPT uses the same formula as VDOT uses to apportion our Section 5303 funding. In FY20, GWRC received $160,477 in combined federal Section 5303 and state matching funding to support multimodal planning activities by FAMPO. So federal funding is 80% of the total. DRPT or the state pitches in a 10% of the total as well. And then I also want to point out that in 2018, the General Assembly began requiring urban transit agencies such as FRED to develop transit strategic plans. Jamie talked about this earlier in the GWRC meeting, and DRPT anticipates that MPOs will use a portion of their Section 5303 funds to support the development of TSPs in their region. So next slide, please. So Section 5307, and I realize this has been talked about at length already, and I'm hopeful you'll still find some of this information useful. It's just more procedural than anything. Section 5307 is an FTA formula-based funding program that provides financial assistance for a variety of project-based capital and planning activities, and project-based is important. Related to public transportation in urbanized areas, and also for operating expenses in small urbanized areas, as the chair also pointed out in the GWRC meeting. Urbanized areas are categorized as either small or large UZAs, with small UZAs having a population between 50,000 and 200,000 people, and then large UZAs have a population of greater than 200,000 people. FTA publishes annual apportionments of 5307 funding in the Federal Register, and while the governor can change the apportionments for small UZAs, the Commonwealth's practice has just been to use the apportionment amounts in the Federal Register and award those as they are published. So Section 5307 funding is, as previously described again in the GWRC meeting, is generated based on transit performance data that is entered into the National Transit Database, such as ridership, revenue hours, revenue miles, as well as factoring in the regional population. The governor's office designates direct recipients of small UZA Section 5307 funds. And while the Commonwealth apportions funds every year, it doesn't designate direct recipients every year. So direct recipients don't change from year to year. If one has been designated in the past, it will carry forward until a change is made. Designated direct recipients of Section 5307 funding are responsible, and this is important. So designated direct direct recipients of Section 5307 funding are responsible for FTA compliance activities and are subject to regular FTA compliance reviews, which are known as triennial reviews. They happen every 3 years, as well as other specialized compliance reviews as needed. So triennial reviews comprise 21 compliance areas, including comprehensive reviews of agency programs such as procurement, financial capacity, asset management, equal employment opportunity policies, a disadvantaged business enterprise program, compliance with Title VI and the ADA, just to name a few. Again, designated direct recipients, there's an additional burden of FTA compliance that must be met in order to receive Section 5307 funding. So next slide, please. So this slide attempts to explain the waterfall of Section 5307 funding in the MWCOG, or the Washington Council of Governments area. So there are 3 generators of Section 5307 funding in the Fredericksburg region, and these again were discussed earlier. I don't think I'm contradicting anything that's already been said. So one is Fred's transit service that is operated in the FAMPO region. The second is Fred's transit service that is operated in the COG region, which is North Stafford County, and then GWRC's van pools that are operating in the COG region. So WMATA, or the Washington Metro, is the designated recipient for all Section 5307 funding in the COG region. WMATA then negotiates a split letter each year with PRTC and the Maryland Transit Administration, also known as the MTA, that allocates the Section 5307 funding generated outside the WMATA compact area of the COG jurisdiction. So in Virginia, that would be Prince William County and Stafford County, and the portion of Stafford County that's in the COG region. And then in Maryland, it would be anything outside of Montgomery County or Prince George's County that's in the COG region. So as a subrecipient of Section 5307 funds to WMATA, PRTC then allocates the 5307 funding again to itself or to OmniRide, to VRE, to Fred for its service in the Stafford County portion of the COG region, and then to the Van Pool Alliance, and that's where that also includes for GWRC's van pools. PRTC would generally execute subrecipient agreements or MOUs with Fred and GWRC for their respective Section 5307 suballocations. My understanding is those agreements or MOUs may be in process and may not actually be signed yet. And then an MOU between PRTC and GRTC would likely allow PRTC to apply for the Section 5307 funding on behalf of GWRC, and then PRTC would retain the responsibility for FTA compliance. And that would be in the COG region, and the 5307 funding coming through the COG region. So Fred is also a designated recipient by the governor for Section 5307 funds generated in the FAMPO region, and that's awarded through the governor's apportionment process that I talked about earlier, just small UZAs. And Fred is subject to the FTA compliance reviews that I talked about earlier. So next slide. So as for flexible funding for transit, DRPT doesn't have a role in determining how those funds are awarded. I think you're all familiar with CMAQ and STP, so I'm not going to spend much time here. But in the cases of both CMAQ and RSTP funding, FAMPO determines how those funds are allocated. Then they work with VDOT to program them. If flexible funding is programmed for a transit project or a transit purpose, then DRPT will work with VDOT and the FTA and FHWA to flex those funds over from the FHWA to FTA. And if there are state matching funds, then VDOT will transfer those funds to DRPT, and then DRPT would award them to the recipient through our grant program. So next slide. So this is the slide that that was not on that original slide that had the laundry list of programs. So finally, I just wanted to provide some information to you on on a relatively new funding program for transit and other multimodal improvements that is available to entities in both the NVTC and PRTC regions. So the I-395, I-95 commuter choice program invests a portion of toll revenues from the I-395-95 express lanes facility into new multimodal transportation enhancements, that benefit toll road users by moving more people and expanding transportation options in the corridor. I think an important word there is new multimodal transportation enhancements. This can't be used to fund existing programs. It has to be a new service that would be launched or a new improvement. NVTC manages this program in partnership with PRTC and the Commonwealth. Transurban provides an annual transit payment to the Commonwealth. NVTC then solicits funding proposals through a call for projects, a biannual call for projects. They're actually getting ready to issue a call for projects this fall, and that will be for FY22 and 23 funding. And then NVTC, with input from PRTC and DRPT, select projects for funding. And then the CTB has to approve projects for funding and inclusion in the SIP. And then an example of this that has been awarded in your region, in the FAMPO region, are the OmniRide bus routes from Staffordsboro to Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon that began operating, I think, within the last year. They're both examples of I-395, I-95 commuter choice program funding. And then next slide, which is my final slide. Guess I would open it up to questions. Again, I'm Todd Horsley, and I'm the Director of Northern Virginia Transit Programs in our Alexandria office, but we interact with FAMPO out of that office primarily. And then also wanted to just note that Ciara Williams is our Northern Virginia Transit Planning Manager, and she attends all of FAMPO's technical committee meetings. And again, I will try to answer any questions you may have. And I may have some DRPT colleagues on the phone that or on the line that also could help.
Thank you very much for your thorough presentation. Do we have any GWRC members who would like to ask questions first? All right, Ms. Shelton, do you have any FAMPO?
FAMPO policy meeting members, do you have any questions to ask DRPT? I just have one question. First of all, Mr. Horsley, I loved your presentation. Thank you so much. There's some blended lines there that I'd like to contact with you about later. But I noticed that the TIP wasn't mentioned anywhere in your presentation. And going back to 5307 and understanding that Stafford has been invited by the TPB, which is the Washington MPO, to submit 5307 projects directly to them. I'm kind of confused now a little by your presentation. Could you clarify that, or would you rather take that offline?
We could probably have a more robust discussion about it offline. I was really just trying to illustrate DRPT's role in some of these funding programs, and the TIP and the planning. The planning elements are generally handled at the MPO level, so that's why I didn't cover them. They're they're obviously very important. They're very important elements. 5307 or really any federal grant awards have to be programmed through the TIP process. But again, I was just really more or less describing how DRPT interacts with these programs. But I'd be happy to try to answer any additional questions offline. Be happy to talk to you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Ms. Bonke, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Bender, Chairman Bender, I do have a question on the very first slide regarding the 50. It referred to the GW Ride Connect program. It didn't identify an actual stream of funding on that particular one. So I was wondering, should that say 5307 money? or maybe it was the second slide. I'm sorry. Was it the next one? Yes, right there. So the 310,000 that GW Ride Connect received for fiscal year 20, is that all 5307 money?
No, this is actually just state funding. It's not federal at all. So my first couple of slides were really just describing state funding programs that come through DRPT. So and then after this slide, I got into the federal programs. But yeah, that 310,000 is not Section 5307. It is purely funding from the Commonwealth.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from GWRC members or the FAMPO committee? Your presentation was very informative. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And like I said, DRPT is happy to, I know you talked about having some additional conversations during the GWRC meeting. We're happy to participate in those.
Thank you very much. I know I'll be reaching out to you. Does anybody else last call for questions?
Yes, this is Supervisor Bomke again. Chairman, I do have a question regarding the MPO controls the TIP and the 5307 projects that must be on the TIP. So does the GWRC process include the FAMPO TIP? Because that's where I'm confused.
Good point.
Do you understand the question?
That's for Mr. Horsley, correct?
Was that what, I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Yes.
I think that's more a question for Dr. Millsap.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to see.
Yeah. So I'll repeat the question. The MPO controls the TIP and the 5307 projects that have to be on the TIP. So does the GWRC process include the FAMPO TIP?
My understanding is that our application actually comes up through PRTC. So the process is through PRTC and they apply on our behalf. But I will follow up and get clarification on that. But that's my understanding at this point.
So I think this is where the part is that the money kind of shifts and it's different colored money when it comes in and when it goes out. And I think that is the point, the place where Stafford is having kind of some pause for concern. You know, to be real, that we don't feel comfortable with that, and something just doesn't seem right there. And you know, I guess I'll just say, from my standpoint, I can't hit the. And I understand that what you are all saying is, yes, this is 5307 money, but then when we ask these kinds of questions, well, you know, and so we can't really hit the I believe button, if you know what I mean. So we're just trying to dig down into things and kind of peel the onion back as every time we receive an answer on something, it might give us more clarity, and then also it might provide more cloudiness on some other items. So as elected officials, we're not pointing the finger at anybody. We're not saying you're wrong. We're just trying to understand. So we appreciate you hanging in there with us on this.
Thank you, ma'am. If I might, I think it'll also help when I send out the MOU that was signed in 2017. That kind of better outlines the relationship, and so we'll get that sent out to you ASAP. You'll probably get it tomorrow morning. Okay, I think that'll help at least a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. So this would wrap up our GWRC portion of this meeting. Do I have a motion from the GWRC board to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. The GWRC portion of this meeting is over. Thank you so much. Chairman Shelton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Binder. Ms. Vigil, would you do a roll call for the FAMPO Policy Committee members?
Madam Chair, good evening. I will defer to you to read the statement for the remote meeting, and then I will take roll call.
Have to do it even though we did it earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, then the agenda is out of order. So I'll be glad to read it again. Okay, due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to the novel coronavirus COVID-19, pursuant to Code 2.23708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body.
Thank you. As this is a record of attendance, everyone, will you please take a moment to unmute your mics so that you're ready to respond when I call your name, as I will be calling out primary as well as alternate members. I will start with Stafford County voting members. Chair Cindy Shelton.
Present.
Mark Budenheffer.
Here.
Ms. Crystal Vanush.
Here.
Ms. Meg Baum. Mr. Thomas Cohen. For Spotsylvania County, First Vice Chair Tim McLaughlin.
Here.
Mr. Chris Yakubowski.
Here.
Ms. Deborah Frazier. Mr. David Ross. Mr. Kevin Marshall. For the City of Fredericksburg, Second Vice Chair Matthew Kelly.
Here. Here.
Mr. Jason Graham.
Here.
Mr. Tim Baruti.
Here.
Mr. Mark Whitley. Mr. Doug Fawcett. For the representative from the Secretary of Transportation, Ms. Marcy Parker.
Here.
Ms. Michelle Shropshire.
Here.
For Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, Dr. Robert Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Joseph Stainsby. Ms. Betsy Massey. Non-voting members, Caroline County, Ms. Nancy Long.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffrey Black. For King George County, Ms. Ann Kupka.
Here.
Ms. Kathy Binder.
Here.
For Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Ivan Rucker. Federal Transit Administration, Ms. Tanya Holland. For Virginia Department of Transportation, Ms. Susan Gardner. Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
For the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Mr. Todd Horsley.
Here.
Ms. Jennifer DeBrule. For Commonwealth Transportation Board, Fredericksburg District Representative, Mr. Cedric Rucker. Fredericksburg Regional Transit, Ms. Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Craig Reed. For Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, CTAC Chair David McLaughlin.
Here.
Thank you. You may now mute your mics, and a quorum is present. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to move for, or actually ask for an approval of the August 10, 2020 Policy Committee agenda and today. And before we do that, I would like to see if it's possible that we can add an item, if we get time to it, frankly, but to have an update on VDOT on their meeting they have with chairs. This is a discussion item. It's not up for vote. It's just to have VDOT give us a briefing on the meeting that they have with the chairs of the different localities, so we can understand their action items. Would anybody like to make a motion for the agenda with that change?
So moved. Crystal from Stafford.
Second, Spotsylvania.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? I'd like to do a smell test. This is a little bit different. And so what I mean by a smell test vote is that I'll ask for everyone to vote for an aye. If I get any nays, then we'll go for a roll call. I think for anyone that was on the VRE call earlier this week, that was a 3-hour call, I think it might improve our processes. So without further ado, I'd like to ask for all those who are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you very much. The ayes have it. We will be adding an item onto the agenda for a short briefing by VDOT on their meeting with the chairs earlier. All right, next item on the agenda is for public involvement. Ms. Vigil, do we have any comments or questions from the public area, the public that you have in your possession at this time?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone who's on this call that would like to make a comment or have questions for our board? Hearing none, I'd like to close that item out. Moving on to item number 7, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the August 10, 2020 Policy Committee meeting minutes?
So moved. Crystal Stafford.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Mr. McLaughlin from Spotsylvania?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir, for the second. All who are in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay, the consent agenda and the policy committee meetings have been approved. That was the only item on the consent agenda. Item number 8, our action and discussion items. Dr. Linda Millsaps is going to provide us an update, a very positive update on our FAMPO administrator hiring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief, but yes, hopefully we're getting close to having really good action. So last week I did initial screening interviews with 8 different applicants, and out of that, and those are all from the most recent round, and out of that, while we forwarded all the information to the executive committee, 3 of them I have recommended for them to consider for an interview, and that was in part on some of the survey responses. I asking what people thought was most important, and I'll tell you very briefly that something that got 100% in terms of how important are these things to the overall work of the organization. 100% of the people said, of everyone that answered, was encouraging regional work, working well with others, and assisting the policy committee to make good and informed decisions. And the other item I will highlight, I'll send this out to everyone, and it's already been forwarded to the executive committee. But 100% of the people said the personality characteristic most important in this role is honesty. And the final finding, which I thought was most interesting, is of the experience and education levels, what matters to you most? And the answer was MPO experience was most important. And so there are some folks in the pool that have some MPO experience, and then some other folks with some really interesting experience. So hopefully Leah has, we've asked Leah on your staff to start reaching out to you after she and I chat some more in the morning to start scheduling, finding times to schedule those interviews with the SAMPO Executive Committee. We continue to have everything posted, and we'll continue to do so till whoever is selected for this role is actually started. So just in case. And Madam Chair, with that, I think that's my report.
Do we have any questions, comments for Dr. Millsaps on our administrator hiring update? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's a year overdue. We're excited. So thank you very much, Dr. Millsaps. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2113, the draft TPB FAMPO Memorandum of Understanding. Just a reminder to individuals that as we're reviewing this, it's considered a draft because we send it forward for their approval. It is not final. Opening it up for discussion, you'll notice that you have two items that were in your package, and these were the ones that were presented originally back in June. Unfortunately, that meeting was delayed, canceled. I don't know what you want to call that meeting, but we did not get to this particular item. And having any other questions, I would like to either open up for discussion, make a motion, someone do something. I know it's exciting this late at night.
Madam Chair, in the interest of time, and that since we have had this for quite some time, I'd like to make a motion to approve with 2 modifications to address some of VDOT and Federal Highways comments on the suballocation of funds. So if you'll move to page 3 under letter C, in the draft, you'll see that it reads, SAMPO shall allocate the TMA and attributed STGB funds to areas applicable to the northern portion of Stafford County that is included in the Washington, D.C. UZA, consistent with 23 U.S.C. 133D2 as amended. I would like to change that language to read, SAMPO shall allocate the TMA attributed STGB funds for the benefit of the TMA consistent with 23 U.S.C. 133D as amended. The second change is very similar, so I'm going to read what's in the draft now under section D, which is selection of projects. Currently it reads, SAMPO shall adhere to a project selection process for the STGB funds, which prioritize projects that are within or directly benefit the northern portion of Stafford County that is included in the Washington, D.C. UZA, pursuant to 23 U.S.C. 134J5K4 as amended. I would like it to read now, SAMPO shall adhere to a project selection process for the STGB funds which prioritizes projects that are within or directly benefit the TMA pursuant to 23 U.S.C. 134J5K4 as amended. And those are the only 2 changes that I am suggesting. That's my motion.
Tim McLaughlin, Spotsylvania, second.
Hearing a motion and a second, do we have any discussion?
Madam Chair, this is Marcy with VDOT.
Yes, ma'am.
Those changes may take out the sub-allocation reference in there. We're not real sure since we just heard them a few minutes ago. But I just do want to remind everybody that we can't sub-allocate, but we can change the prioritization process to give additional consideration to projects within the TMA. And by what Ms. Banuch said, it seems like those changes do accommodate that. So we'll see what TBB thinks, but I do appreciate the response to our July 15th comments on this topic.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have been talking about this a long time, and I think even Fredericksburg has said be willing to chat with Stafford County to make some accommodations. But what basically is happening here is we are taking an allocation, and I fully understand it's Northern Stafford and it doesn't tie in with our area, and saying, okay, this money has to be spent in North Stafford, but oh, by the way, Stafford County also wants to go ahead and spend the money generated by Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania County. That's the message you're sending us. that we want this money for ourselves, and then we want your money as well. And again, I don't know what direction we're going in. And the fact of the matter is, by January 2022, as I understand it, the information from the census will be in place, and in all probability, our areas will combine, and we're going to be having a discussion whether we're all part of the TPB or whether we stay independent. And then the question becomes, what happens to this document? I mean, basically, time has really overcome this. And I think it's setting a bad precedent, because it's basically saying one county wants which they feel is money generated by them should be spent only in their jurisdiction, but they also want money from the other jurisdictions. We might as well just go ahead and decide and start, which we can't do, as Marcy just pointed out, start saying, okay, Spotsylvania generates this much, the city generates this much, and then we'll all just spend our money in our allocations, which means no regional projects get done. I think this is setting a bad precedent. I think we need to take this out, and I think we need to come back and have a discussion and agreement between FAMPO and Stafford on a process to continue to do this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Any other comments and questions?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Graham, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I apologize. I came on in July before this was, or after this had been released. So this is a little bit new to me. Tried to review this before the meeting, but I wanted to understand, and maybe you or Ms. Vanuch may be able to help when we talk about things that are beneficial. As I understand it, the point of doing a lot of these projects is to the benefit of to Stafford County, particularly for reducing traffic congestion. I mean, that becomes a direct benefit, and so I'm not quite sure what the direct benefits are going to be that would be separately brought out, unless you're saying that we're going to draw, essentially a geofence around where certain projects can occur. Is that the idea, that there is essentially a geofence? Because I do believe there's a direct benefit to the residents of Northern Stafford County by many of these projects, just like there is to Spotsylvania County and the city of Fredericksburg. So I wanted to see if I understand if you are specifically referring to that geofence in and of itself.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Jason Towery from Stafford. Mr. Graham, just to try and answer your question, the TAC has been working for the past couple months and has continued to work. I think we're going to get an update later this evening on the prioritization methodology for STBG and CMAQ funding. One of the things that the TAC has been considering as part of that is what exactly that would look like. How do you define the benefit? We've had discussion with staff from the city and Spotsylvania and others about how to quantify that and make sure that there are fair and objective criteria and methods in there to make sure that that's done. So really right now, again, this is a two-part process. The first part being the MOU with the TPB, trying to clarify what the FAMPO responsibilities are and what the TPB responsibilities are. Part two of that, which is still in process, is that prioritization methodology and update that TAC is working on.
So then a clarification then, that prioritization process, if Northern Stafford County is getting called out specifically, does that essentially give them bonus points for all prioritizations?
So again, I think the TAC is still trying to work through exactly how to define what the benefit would be. But again, if you go back to the federal language, the TMA area generates those funds, and the MPO is responsible to serve the TMA. So in the case of how that actually happens, I think that's what we're still seeking to define at the TAC level. Ultimately, we'll need to bring that before the policy committee. It would likely, and again, the TMA right now is still within Stafford, but as was referenced before, there's a chance that the TMA area could change, and that's why we've broadly defined this as the area of the TMA. But anything that's going to be a benefit to that. So we've talked about things that are going to take off traffic off of the highways that are affecting congesting the TMA areas. So certainly various transit activities could also be, could also have some additional funding points allowed for that. So it does not have to be a project directly in the TMA. I think that's where a lot of the confusion is coming from. The language note was never intended to say it has to be in the TMA, but it would need to show a defined benefit to the TMA.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair, if I go back and look at the minutes, and we talked about the prioritization process as part of this discussion, it was agreed months ago that we would have the prioritization worked out before we move forward with the agreement. So now are we saying we've decided to go in a different direction? That's point one. Point two would be, per our meeting face-to-face, you mentioned that this was not coming forward as an action item, but a discussion item. That has changed. And I would also ask that if this is going to the TPB and they can still make changes and they make any substantive changes, then our vote is moot anyway. So I come back to the question of why are we voting on this now?
Anyone have any comments or questions? In addition to those Mr. Kelly added, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, this is Marcy again with VDOT. I just want to clarify that the MPO is to serve the region. It is not specifically to serve the TMA. So I don't disagree with there should be some sort of points to projects maybe that benefit the TMA, but remember that the whole purpose of the MPO is for the region. The TMA does have some other requirements that we have to follow, and it does bring in a lot of the money, but again, the money goes to the entire region.
Marcy, Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Parker, this is Jason. Just to respond, yes, the MPO certainly serves the region. However, when you look at the federal language, it's clear that the MPO also serves the TMA specifically. So the funds that are given to the MPO because of the TMA are intended, in our understanding through the federal language, to be used to serve the TMA, not the other way around.
Madam Chairman, I call a question.
Thank you, Mr. Dudenheffer. You're correct. Having had the question called, I'd like to call for a vote. And on this particular item, I suspect that we're going to have some disagreement. So I'd like to do a roll call vote. Ms. Vigil, would you mind leading that?
Okay, I will do that. Okay, Chair Cindy Shelton.
We had a motion to approve with the adjustment. Thank you. I had to get myself back to where I was.
Yes.
I vote yes. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mark Dudenheffer?
I vote yes.
Ms. Vanush?
Yes.
Mr. Tim McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall? For the City of Fredericksburg, Matthew Kelly?
No.
Mr. Graham?
No.
Ms. Parker?
I'm going to vote yes just to get it moving forward with the amendments that Ms. Vanuch made.
Yes. And Dr. Schneider?
I'm going to abstain due to my lack of experience with this issue.
Hey, could I just chime in one? This is Tim McLaughlin. Kevin Marshall texted me. He said his mic is muted by you. Could you unmute him and ask him for another call? Vote?
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I vote
Did you say yes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My vote, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, this is Tim Baruti. I also vote no. I wasn't called.
I'm sorry I missed you. Yes. So that is 7 yeses to 3 noes and 1 abstention.
Thank you, ma'am. So resolution 2113 for the draft TPB FAMPO MOU will now go forward to their review. Yes, ma'am. Was there another comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is item number C, is the GW Ride Connect study idea. Mr. McLaughlin, I believe you brought this forward.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I was expecting something put together. Ultimately, I was looking at where should this GW Ride connect? And we've done an analysis or a study that determines, is it best suited under FAMPO or GWRC? You know, it's a transit issue. So it seems like it should be under FAMPO vice under GWRC. But what we need to do is put some kind of analysis together and bring it to the boards to make that determination.
I understand now, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin, and I'll tell everyone, I think that one of the things that we've discovered in the last 2 weeks in our discussion about 5307 money with PRTC was that GW Ride Connect is not a transit item. It is a customer service that they provide to van pools. Van pools are transit, they are not. And so with that understanding, does that change your idea of having a study for GW Ride Connect? Or if it doesn't, frankly, I'd like to table it for right now because I don't think we have any additional information to discuss.
Yeah, I would say tabling right now is a good idea.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Moving on to item D, CMAQ and STBG prioritization methodology update. Mr. Alex Oziak. Yes, I'm excited about this.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Alex Oziak, Chairman of the TAC Committee here. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot to update on our prioritization process. We did form a working group at our last meeting consisting of myself, Eric Nelson from City of Fredericksburg, and Paulie Miller from Spotsylvania, along with Bob Schneider from PRTC and Adam Hager with FAMPO. And we're going to be working together to try to create a rough draft of updated prioritization process for CMAQ and the STBG funds, and hopefully get that out to the rest of the members of the FAMPO TAC Committee October-November period for further review and comment. And once we incorporated those comments and have a more put together draft format, we will submit that to Policy Committee for their review and approval. And that's all I have.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Oziak. Go ahead. Who's trying to ask the question?
Mark Diedneffer. Just a question is, who's the Stafford rep on that committee?
That's me, sir.
Okay.
Alex Oziak.
Okay, thanks.
Before I ask other people questions, I have a question, Mr. Oziak. In the conversation that you've had on the prioritization methodology, is it including our concept of including benefits that will, be associated quantifiably against the TMA?
Yes. Okay. We haven't solidified that now. We're still in kind of early discussions, but we're thinking about having some kind of, extra points or something like that would be applied to projects that benefited the TMA area to give them kind of benefit of the score.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other comments and questions? Thank you. I look forward to seeing that. All right. The next item on the agenda is the Spotsylvania's request to fully fund UPC 115614, Route 1 Market Street. Mr. Agnello.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. As discussed in July, I'm following up on the county's request that FAMPO fully fund UPC 115614. Which is the Route 1 Market Street project. This project had been partially funded, and the project needs a $1.12 million approximately in additional funding. The details from the The VDOT cost estimate are basically shown on the screen. I'll say basically in the past, FAMPO has traditionally funded existing projects before considering funding new projects. So we humbly request that FAMPO consider funding this project basically when funding becomes available, which is expected to become available next month, as a result of some CMAQ and RSP funding that is available, as well as potentially from a swap with some 5307 funding. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions about the UPC 115614? This is Chair Shelton. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
I guess a question and a comment. First off, has Spotsylvania County made their full commitment for their dues to this organization? Again, we had a discussion how much that's costing us for matching funds. I guess I'll direct that question to Dr. Millsaps. Is Spotsylvania fully agreed to make the full payment yet?
Spotsylvania County included $75,000 in their budget, and that was that's what paid. But that would be less than full per capita calculation.
All right, thank you. Second question I have is we just spent a lot of time talking about 5307 and how we didn't want to spend any more 5307 money until we get a better handle on what we're going to do with it in the future. And I think I just heard that we're now going to use 5307 funding for a project. Is that correct?
So 5307 funding cannot be used for this project.
But you're talking about
CMAQ and STBG can.
Right, I understand what you're saying, but it still involves playing around with it. That's okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Tim McLaughlin, motion to approve.
Second, Crystal from Stafford.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any additional discussion? Without further ado, I'd like to do that smell test vote that I mentioned earlier. All who, I'm sorry, go ahead. Was there a discussion that I missed? Okay, thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to ask all who approve, say aye.
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 Aye. All who disagree, say no.
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 Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Thank you, Ms. Vigil. Would you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, ma'am. So on the request from Spotsylvania County for FAMPO to fully fund UPC 115614 for the project Route 1 and Market Street, a vote will be taken. For Stafford County, Chair Cindy Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
Aye.
Ms. Vanush.
Aye.
For Spotsylvania County, Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Fredericksburg, Mr. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Graham.
No.
Mr. Baroudi.
No.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Dr. Schneider.
Abstain, new project.
Seven ayes and 3 nays. 1 abstention. The vote passes by majority.
Thank you, Ms. Vigil. All right, moving on to the next item. Item F is a CMAQ STBG call for projects. Mr. Hager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. So this is a topic that was last discussed at the July 20th FAMPO Policy Committee meeting. And for those of you who were at the GWRC meeting earlier this evening, you would have seen this presentation. So I will keep this brief and not read through every slide, but I'll provide some highlights. The Policy Committee on July 20th directed the TAC to propose new parameters for projects for the call for projects that we're discussing without consideration for transit agencies. So we focused it solely to the localities. And so that's sort of the gist of where this is going. But again, going back to the idea is to leverage 5307 funding in order to free up and then reallocate CMAQ and potential STBG funding as well. So as discussed at the GWRC meeting, the amount of funding that's available is, of course, largely dependent on the GWRC board, as well as any existing projects that have CMAQ or STBG that may not be pushing forward for one reason or another. So to speed up just a bit to the FAMPO role here, so we are at the point now where we're doing the call for projects, and after the July 20th meeting, of course, the TAC met on September 8th to solidify a recommendation to this board as far as what the parameters might be for the call for projects. And so the question and the action that's requested of this board tonight is, does the policy committee want to direct our staff to hold a call for projects in accordance with what the TAC recommended? And so the TAC did recommend 2 projects per locality, and each of those need to be a smart scale project. So I will highlight that text here. And then with that, I would also like to, if I could, Madam Chair, ask Mr. Agnello to present a proposed regional solution that was presented at the TAC and then modified slightly in the time set.
Thank you, Adam, and good evening to members of the board. So I'll say what the FAMPO TAC has been doing for the last couple months is basically developing a regional solution. And basically the TAC leadership has been leading this effort. From the city of Fredericksburg, there was Eric Nelson and Jamie Jackson. From Stafford County, Jason Towery and Alex Oziak. And then from Spotsylvania County, Rodney White and myself. So what's presented here is a proposed $6.3 million regional solution developed by the TAC leadership staff to better utilize available FAMPO, CMAQ, and STBG funds, as well as 5307 funding under GWRC. The central part of this, which involves both committees, is there is a current VRE project in Stafford for the Stafford stations at Brook and Leland that has approximately $2.8 million in CMAQ. To take that funding off and then basically to replace it with 5307 funding, which is an eligible funding source for this type of project. And then that $2.8 million in CMAQ would be available for other local transportation projects in the city of Fredericksburg, Stafford County, or Spotsylvania County. I'll say in addition, there is some available STPG funds and CMAQ funding available for local projects that's not tied to any current project. There's $525,000 in STBG funding, and there's about $245,000 in CMAQ funding that was on a Stafford Quantico bus project, which no longer needs to be used by that project. So when you combine all of these sources together, they could potentially come to an amount of funding of $3.561 million. So on the FAMPO side, there could be $3.561 million for additional local transition projects. And then on the GWC side, there could be basically using 5307 funding for about $2.8 million for the VRE station projects in Stafford, for Brook, and Leland. The total out of these sources would be a combined deal of about $6.3 million. This represents work by basically the jurisdiction staff over the course of the last 3 months or so, and it does reflect regional cooperation. With that, I can take any questions.
Madam Chair, this is Jamie Jackson from Fred Transit. I just want to clarify, I did request to be a part of this committee, but I was not involved, even though I've seen this project information prior to this meeting, I was not involved in the development of it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Madam Chair, this is Marcy from VDOT. VDOT has the same issues in that we were not involved in this. It doesn't appear that based on this email that it's very transparent since these changes were made after the TAC meeting. And I think that we need to memorialize the process, meaning like call for projects and things like that, before we make any changes like this. That is not fair to restrict who can submit projects, as we have not done that before as FAMPO. So this process can be memorialized along with the prioritization process being looked at.
Thank you, ma'am. I do think there's some clarification that does need to happen. And pardon me if I misremember this, but I believe, with all due respect to Fred, that we had originally voted in FAMPO to exclude transit projects out of this call for projects. So that's number one. And then the next question I would ask the group is, we currently have a list of STBG RSTP projects and our CMAQ projects. And so why would they not be included as well? And why would we not have included VDOT in these conversations?
So, Madam Chair, this is Paul Aniello. I just want to respond that this was part of the TAC process. And although it was led by the TAC leadership, the VDOT is part of the TAC, and they participated in the meeting when we talked about this proposal.
Okay, so this was included with the TAC. It's not something separate.
I'll say that basically what is being proposed tonight is less than what was proposed at the TAC. And the reason for that, there were a couple of changes we considered, and the city had some concerns with them, so we took them out in response to comments from city staff.
Chairman Shropshire, I do believe VDOT had voted no at this item at the TAC meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have some additional discussions on this?
This is Marcy again. Did anybody vote on this TAC leadership team that gets to meet separately from the TAC and make decisions?
Marcy, this is Jason. Can you clarify your question? I'm a little confused.
Paul keeps referring to the leadership team met and decided this, and this, but not the entire TAC. And he named off 6 people that represent the localities only, and not VDOT or PRTC or any of the other transit, agencies that are on it. So it seems like the leadership team, as he referenced, is who's making these decisions, and it's not going in front of the full TAC. This email, it says, update since 9/8 FAMPO TAC meeting. So there has been other discussion that's occurred since the last TAC meeting that the TAC has not been able to see.
With that, ma'am, we're blessed to actually have the chairman of the TAC here, Mr. Alex Ozak. I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. It's very important to the FAMPO committee to be able to have the transparency that we desire for our constituents. And so there's a perception that we may have stepped astray from that. Could you answer that, Mr. Alex?
I will say, Ms. Parker, from my knowledge, I'm not aware of any kind of separate leadership team from the TAC that's meeting separately and making decisions outside of the general TAC committee membership. So I'm not sure exactly maybe what Mr. Agnello was referring to in his presentation, but there certainly is no separate subcommittee made of TAC leadership making decisions outside of the overall TAC committee.
Ms. Parker, this is Supervisor Bomke. While I'm not a voting member, I just wanted to say, are you under an impression that there's something else going on that needs to be shared?
Well, I am, only because Paul named off 6 people who are on and said that they are on the FAMPO TAC leadership team.
Mr. Agnello,
Yeah.
Mr. Agnello, would you mind stepping forward and explaining this to us? And so I think we're getting the perception that a smaller group of the TAC has taken some action to present something to FAMPO that TAC may not be aware of.
Yes, I would be happy to clarify. So there have been no separate meetings outside of the FAMPO TAC. The last TAC meeting, we talked about a proposal that was very similar to this. The difference kind of was there basically on number one, the city basically has a project which was discussed at the TAC. And I'll say that basically subsequent after the TAC, the city had some concerns with that. So in response to the city concerns, and this was, I believe, Doug Fawcett's, Eric Nelson, and Jamie Jackson meeting, they requested that basically a project be taken off of consideration of what would go to the FAMPO Policy Committee, so we took it off. In response to the request from the city, there was no intent to not work cooperatively or not work regionally. I say with the smart scale deadline, the deadline basically for allocating any additional funds for projects is October 30th. So time is of the essence. We're trying to work cooperatively. We're trying to be good team members and basically try to develop something that the policy committee can consider.
So was this email sent to the entire TAC after these decisions were made after the TAC meeting?
So this email was sent to Adam and Kate from GWC.
Just a second, guys.
That's a lack of transparency.
Yeah, just one second. Mr. Marshall, would you mind muting your phone, please? It's causing some feedback. Thank you. Ms. Parker, would you restate your comment before I interrupted you, ma'am?
I feel that because the email was not sent to the entire TAC to let them know what was going on, that there's a lack of transparency with this.
I'm going to step out and just say that as a chair, not that I'm any more important than any of you, I agree. And I think we have an opportunity here for this improvement to be discussed with the TAC and then either offline in some formal way, bring it back to FAMPO to meet that deadline. Does anybody have a suggestion how to make sure that that happens?
Madam Chair, if I may, I suppose then the recommendation would be to go back to the tax recommendation, which included the city's projects to be removed and swapped out. The VCR Trail Connector project, I believe, was the one. Paul, you may be able to speak better to that, but if that might be the one that's in question here, and perhaps the city can address their concerns post the TAC meeting as to why they specifically requested the change to the tax recommendation.
Yes, Jason, that is correct.
Perhaps the city could address their concerns with the VCR trail. And if there are no concerns, then we can proceed forward with presenting the full TAC recommendation. I think that this was apparently done in a manner to be sensitive to the city's request.
Madam Chair, this is Jamie Jackson, if I may. I don't know if is Eric on the call? Okay, so if Eric isn't on the call, I will do my best based on the conversation I had with Eric about the project. So yes, I did see this information and it was provided to me. The discussion around it, and let me be clear, was as we were having discussion about CMAQ and RSTP funding swap. The reason, to my knowledge, that the city had removed that particular project was related to basically this whole conversation regarding funding in 5307 and CMAQ funding, where they could remove the project at this time. And the ultimate goal was to provide the jurisdiction in the region in a position to be able to support the transit projects that we had in place. So the project wasn't eligible for 5307. There are reasons why the city's project could not move forward at this time. And if Fred had an eligible project that could have been swapped out for the CMAQ RSTP funding, the jurisdiction would be open to Fred putting a project there. So at this point, the city would, guidance based on the conversation that I had with Eric was removing the funds. They asked if we had an eligible project available, and our direction was that we would defer to the GWRC board in funding our other projects. That is the reason why Fred agreed with the TAC to remove transit projects from this round of funding, because there was eligible funding through the 5307 van pool money. So I think the city's goal in this process was that regional point where provide free up funding for the region, because funding for jurisdictional projects could move forward and Fred could still advance its project under the van pool funding. So that's the clarity, to my knowledge, is why that project was removed. So that's my update. But I do want to be clear that the discussions that were had regarding this project list between the city staff, Fred had not had many of those discussions. Not saying we weren't supportive of this project and the project information in it. It's more that we were anticipating support on the transit projects that did not move forward, which I think some of these funding swaps were contingent on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ma'am.
Mr. Kelly has.
Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, a few points. Again, we're talking about using 5307 money, which one, GWRC controls, not FAMPO. So this is moot until GWRC potentially signs off on the switch of the funding. That's one. Two, I got to agree with Marcy. Again, this came to us in the last few days again, and with changes being made and referenced again, to try to get stuff funded as quickly as possible, again, without due process, without making it a truly regional discussion, and just, again, I'm assuming will be rammed through again, as the others have been, without any forethought, with questions that you all had about 5307 allocations and saying we couldn't move forward with this project or that project because we don't know what we're going to do with it, and are now trying to approve projects to shift around and use 5307 money again. I would ask that this be deferred.
Ms. Pomke.
Yeah, so it seems like in listening to what everybody said, I don't think Ms. Jackson, although she did a very eloquent job in answering this question and trying to address it on behalf of the city, it seems like the city staff was very well aware of this, and that somehow, Matt, you're not getting notified of things, and it seems like that's where the disconnect is.
Regardless, go ahead. I think that we have an opportunity here to improve this, and so I would like to have y'all entertain a motion to defer this item to our next meeting. That's when we're going to be bringing back 5307 anyway. Do I have a motion to defer?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a motion and a second. All who are in favor say aye.
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 If opposed, say no. Excuse me, was there anyone that said no? Motion passes. The item has been deferred to the next meeting. Please mute your mics. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Hager, is the LRTP. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So tonight is a quick update on what will be our team's major work effort for FY21. So as a reminder, of course, the LRTP was put on hold this past December, and we've put together a work plan to pick this effort back up over the last month and a half or so in working with our TAC. This document basically highlights what the completed tasks are to date, so basically where things left off in November and December of 2019, as well as tasks that our team is going to complete over the next 14 or 15 months, and what our consultant Cambridge Systematics is going to complete with their task order. We do have a high-level schedule that we are working to refine, and should have some more details on that next month. So I will go ahead and quickly scroll through this document. Again, this also includes a pretty detailed public involvement initiative as well, with some of the efforts that we're trying to do to get community engagement with this effort. And then, of course, this is the task order with Cambridge. And so did also want to mention to the committee that we are starting to conduct some research and collect some data related to the impacts of COVID-19. And we're starting to work on basically the setup of reissuing the call for projects for the LRTP that will take place likely in November or December of this year. We're also working with DRPT and VDOT regarding projected revenues from now until 2050. So that's a pretty significant undertaking for our team, trying to get that information and put it together in one place. So we do hope to have more details on that at the October Policy Committee meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hager. Any questions, comments, concerns? Well, we look forward to your update, sir. Next item on the agenda is the Smart Scale Round 4 update. Mr. Matthew Lehane.
Yep, thank you. Hello, everyone. So this will be quick. Just want to let everyone know that the Smart Scale projects that were supported by this committee were submitted by the deadline in August, and we are working to answer any questions or comments that we get on our applications. And also wanted to just thank the localities and VDOT and others for their assistance getting the application submitted. And then if it's okay, I wanted to pass it off to Adam for the resolution that is on your screen now.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matthew. So we have before you tonight the resolution 2112. This is not a required resolution for the Smart Scale process. Part of what we're attempting to do as a staff with this is provide some extra coverage, if you will, in the VDOT and DRPT validation process for 3 applications that are not explicitly listed in the constrained long-range plan right now as it stands. So part of what Smart Scale wants to see in the scoring process is a clear line between the MPO's LRTP and then the projects that we select for Smart Scale. And so this is a way of basically saying, as an MPO, we support these 3 projects here in particular that you'll see at the bottom of the screen, despite the fact that, again, just due to timing constraints, they're not in the existing CLRP. So like I said, it is not required. It's not something that the NPO has to pass. We did put this before the TAC a couple weeks ago, and they did vote to push this to the policy committee and have us upload this with the Smart Scale application.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. Is there a downside to us approving this? I don't see one. So if you've got one, I'd like to hear it from the policy committee.
No, there's not necessarily a downside. We did run the idea of this by VDOT. There were some updates to the technical guidance for round 4. And again, while it's not a requirement, it's just a way of providing just some extra coverage since that's available to us. Different scores might have different interpretations of the long-range plan and how the projects tie into Smart Scale. So again, it's just a way to provide more robust support as an MPO for these projects.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a motion for resolution 21-12?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Panuch. All who in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is FY 21-24, the TIP update. Ms. Chandler.
Hi, thank you, Mrs. Chair. I have 3 quick updates. So the TIP for the 21-24 fiscal years will be scheduled to be implemented in October 1st. The first thing that we have to talk about is the Public Transportation Safety Plan, the PTASP. It's the final performance measures from MAP 21 and the FAST Act. And it was required that we add transit safety targets by February 2021. And this is for all MPOs with a Tier 2 transit agency. And for us, that's Fredericksburg or Fred Transit. And it looks at fatalities, injuries, safety events, and reliability within the system, and making sure those targets are met by the federal requirements. And so this will be brought to you when the language and targets are added into the TIP in an amendment that you guys will vote on later when that is implemented. The next thing that we have brought to you is the STIP development and rollover process. This will be what the STIP is all of the MPO tips and the rural projects for the state. The rollover action will be taken. So all the amendments that have been made to the 21 or the FY 18 and 21 tip will be rolled over in an amendment for the 21 to 24 tip. So this amendment will go before Tax, CTAC, and Policy Committee in November or January to be voted on. And then the last thing that we're creating at the FAMPO staff is a tip procedural document. So this is similar to what other MPOs have. So any revisions that are requested by the MPO will be made into a document so that illustrates how administrative modifications and amendments will be made. And we're looking to collaborate with VDOT and DRPT for their inputs as we create that document. And I can answer any questions about the tip.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. I, just as an aside, while I was reviewing all the bylaws for different FAMPOs, different MPOs, yeah, there's a lot of us. Anyway, different MPOs, I did notice that a lot of them included their tip procedural items within that. So I look forward to seeing your recommendations. Do we have any other comments or questions? I'm sorry, I'm tired. Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for the update. Next item on the agenda is I'm sorry, was there a question? No. I might have been going too fast. I'll slow down. Item J, FAMPO annual report. Ms. Barber.
Thank you. Good evening. So the 2020 annual report summarizes our accomplishments for FY20. We were a very small staff this year, but we were able to complete a good bit. For public involvement, we were featured 8 times in news articles, and we held public comment periods for the TIP and LRTP and their related air quality conformity analyses, and the FY20 and 21 UPWPs. We included a website, online surveys, social media polling, and in-person outreach. We had a good engagement for all of these efforts. For our website, we expanded it quite a bit, and we increased our social media presence with a new community Facebook page. For further discussion, we used targeted posts, we live streamed our meetings, and we posted them to YouTube. Before COVID, we conducted outreach events at libraries around the area and began posting our meeting notices more widely. The Transportation Improvement Program, a 4-year list of transportation projects for the FAMPO area. The draft tip was approved in May 2020 by this committee, and we anticipate federal approval October 1st. On the next slide here is an interactive map of tip projects for the region. You can use this map to find out more details about any of the projects. You can click Explore down in the bottom corner and go through and take a look further on any of them. Go ahead on the next one. For Smart Scale Round 4, as you know, FAMPO staff worked closely with VDOT and DRPT to submit 5 pre-applications and 4 final applications, and they are detailed here. Lastly, for the Lafayette Boulevard Transit Study, FAMPO staff worked with a consultant in FY 2019 and FY 20 to complete a transit study of Lafayette Boulevard. Overall, the study recommends increasing frequency along the corridor, transit connectivity between the corridor and the rest of the region, and improving passenger experience, and mitigating parking issues at the Fredericksburg station. And these are just some of the highlights of our FY20 for FAMPO staff. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Barber? Thank you. That was most informative. Oh, yes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Graham.
So actually, Ms. Barber, thank you. I'm interested to learn more about increasing the frequency around Lafayette Boulevard and the opportunity for other connectivity. Was that discussed on providing more connectivity to, I guess, bus stops along Lafayette Boulevard from the neighborhoods, whether it's pedestrian trails or other opportunities?
Yeah, we did work on providing better connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists from the neighborhoods along Lafayette Boulevard, but we also, that specific sentence is mentioning connectivity between the Lafayette corridor and the rest of the region, such as points in North Stafford where folks are commuting to work from the Lafayette corridor. But yes, definitely bike and pedestrian connectivity was part of the study, and we're doing further work on that as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barber.
Thank you.
Next item, thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is the bylaws discussion. If you remember from the last meeting, I had promised to take all of your inputs and collect them and to put into a red line version of the bylaws, which was included. There were a lot of recommended changes, so much so that I would actually like to propose that we consider just one aspect of that change, if you guys can give me a little grace here. And one of the challenges that we discovered is, and now that all of us know that we have a weakness in our bylaws, it has to do with a quorum. And so one of what you'll see in the current bylaws are a recommendation from our legal office here in Stafford on how one way that we could get around making sure that we have a quorum no matter what happens. And I'd like to entertain one thing. One is just, let's limit it to just talking about the quorum and remind people that we can't vote on it tonight. It's got to rest for 30 days. And then second, ensure that we bring this item back at a future date to go through the other additional discussions after we've got the quorum in place. And the reason I'm proposing that is that was such a powerful observation that, as you know, it shut down our operations and we couldn't operate. So by making sure that we have a quorum in place as we go forward in the future, I would think that would be our number one thing that we would want to change in our bylaws and make all the other ideas and suggestions a future discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Madam Chair, this is Marcy from VDOT.
Yes, ma'am.
So technically, you're not supposed to be discussing this unless it's in your UPWP, and updating the bylaws is not in your UPWP. You can maybe vote tonight to make an amendment to your UPWP to review the bylaws and make changes. But other than that, we really can't discuss it or vote on it.
I did not know that, even though we discussed it last meeting.
I think it was mentioned last meeting, and I know that we've mentioned it at the TAC when they've talked about it too, that it needs to be in the UPWP.
Okay, we're looking around each other mystified.
So Madam Chair, why is that? Why can this board not discuss this board's own bylaws?
You can discuss it, but you can't make any changes to it because you're talking about updating it.
My understanding was we were presenting a change to the bylaws, and then next meeting we will vote to make the change. That's what was the discussion.
But it is not in your UPWP.
So, Ms. Parker, could we make a vote to amend the UPWP to add in a change to our bylaws at our next meeting? Is that what we can do? Because we can't vote on the, frankly, we can't vote on the bylaws next meeting anyway, just because it hadn't been 30 days.
Well,
yeah, you can add to the, you can make a recommendation to add to the UPWP an item to amend your bylaws, to review them and amend them.
Madam Chair, where is that? Where in our UPWP is that written?
It's not. That's the problem. It needs to be in the UPWP. And the UPWP determines all the work that MPO staff can work on throughout the year as per the federal code.
Mr. Oziak.
Hey, Ms. Parker, this is Alex Oziak. I've looked up here the definition for the UPWP on the FAMPO website, and it says it just serves as the annual work program for FAMPO, provides details for the transportation-related planning activities that FAMPO intends to accomplish during the program year utilizing federal, state, and local resources. So I don't see how this would really apply to the board's changing or updating of their own bylaws if it's not really a transportation-related planning activity using federal or state funds.
It's an
There's
organization.
an entire section in the UPWP about FAMPO administration, and it would fall under that.
So, Madam Chair, I would say, what about all the locality money that's contributed towards this program? That's not state or federal funding. I can't believe, you got to show me a specific paragraph that says we cannot amend bylaws or anything unless it's written out in the UPWP. Because I don't remember any of these discussions when we were going over the MOUs in the past.
We'll be happy to refer you to the CFR for you to read.
Sounds good. I'm ready. I like circulars.
Pull it up. We're waiting. So, Marcy, maybe you could provide that to the board prior to, well, by tomorrow. Could you pull that up? The specific statement, get a legal review that tells us that we're wrong. I say we move forward, and then if we're wrong, and we'll adjust next meeting. But to delay this because of a bold bureaucratic, and I don't think I agree, and I'm going to say most of the people here probably don't agree with it either.
I would agree that we also don't know what we don't know. So I would urge caution as we go forward. And this is the chair, not that I'm the boss of you guys. And so what I would like to do is entertain the motion to go ahead and put in a change to our UPWP, for one, to allow us to do the bylaws, assuming that that's correct. And then number two, go ahead and think about, have a discussion, not changing, not taking an action, just having a discussion about what we would want to have in those bylaws for our next meeting, knowing that our next meeting is not 30 days. And as a reminder, is that we now know that all we have to do is not show up to a meeting and all work in the Fredericksburg area ceases. And I don't think that's an appropriate power that we ever wanted to give any one of us in any one of its localities. And so now that we know that that opportunity exists, my fear is that any one of us, because we're all such wonderful, loving individuals to each other, could decide in the future to do something like that. So my interest as a chair to get us past updating the bylaws to ensure that we have a quorum. It's just straight up how I feel about it. I'm open for discussion, please. What do you think of that?
Matt's got it.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's no vote on it tonight, we can't vote on it at the next meeting for the 30 days. I would just say we defer it until the next meeting where you can make the UPWP changes and then have it ready for voting the next time. I don't see what the big rush is to have a discussion right now when there's nothing you can do with it at this point.
Exactly. That's what I was proposing, is that we make the UPWP change tonight, that we amend our UPW. I can't make a motion. You know that. I'm the chair.
Madam Chair, just to follow up, again, we've supposedly had discussions where we weren't going to be putting things on the agenda and voting them on the same evening, and now we're going right back to it on a number of occasions. Again, you could wait to the next meeting, make the UPWP change as a part of the agenda, because we can't vote on the changes to the bylaws anyway and carry it through, and try to keep some modicum of a process in place before we totally trash it.
Okay, you don't have to be mean about it, but I agree with you that we have really no reason to do it. So I appreciate you saying that we should wait.
Can I add one thing, Madam Chair? This is Adam with FAMPO.
Go ahead, Mr. Hager.
So I'll ask Stacy, who's on the line, to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe in SAMPO's public participation plan, if we do require a UPWP amendment, that itself requires a 30-day public comment period. So we're not aware of any regulation that says that the amending the bylaws need to be in the UPWP, but if that is the case, and that's what this board decides, that itself requires a 30-day public comment period before that change can be implemented.
Madam Chair, that really doesn't change the dynamic. It's still, we're 2 meetings out to vote on it, so that just means we vote on the UPWP the same night that we vote on the changes to the bylaws. You would just start the 30 days after we vote for it in the next meeting. And then in the next meeting, you vote for both.
So, Madam Chair.
Mr. McLaughlin.
We're probably not getting anywhere. And again, the concern on this one is that somebody doesn't like the process, maybe they'll just walk out of the meeting and waste everybody's time. So we don't want that to happen again. That's why this is the most important thing here. So I might add, if we're going to postpone this, that since VDOT brought up this technicality, that they do the research and provide that back to the board so we can have that decision made. I'd put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have, thank you, Mr. Dudenheffer. He seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Madam Chair, what are we voting on? We're just asking VDOT to give us information.
We're asking VDOT to provide us the details behind the statement they made that delayed this vote, to provide us the legal justification and not provide the CFR, not to provide a 40-page manual, to give us the actual paragraph that has legal binding behind it.
May I ask, if I could, that we just have asked Marcy if she'll provide that information? I do not see the reason understanding for a motion.
Well, because I asked for it and I got it's in the Code of Federal Regulations. So now I'm putting it in the form of a motion and it's been seconded. I'd ask you call the question.
Procedurally, Mr. Kelly, I think he's correct. We have a motion on the table. We have a second. And I need to call for a vote. So without further ado, Mr. McLaughlin, will you restate the question?
The motion is to have VDOT provide this board with all the details, the legal details as to why we cannot amend this policy's bylaws. And UPWP has to be amended prior to that. There's a lot of facts are stated out there with no basis behind it. So I want VDOT to present the case so we can move forward on the next meeting. But right now, it's just hearsay at this point. And I was told, go look at some of the Code of Federal Relations or go look somewhere else. But if you're going to make that statement, I want somebody to provide the facts because that's what's required at this point.
So I have a motion and I have a second. All who approve, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Oh.
Thank you. Ms. Vigil, would you do a roll call vote?
Yes, Madam Chair. So on the question or request to VDOT to provide documentation to the policy committee to make amendments or changes to UPWP in order to update bylaws, we have a vote for Stafford County, Chair Cindy Shelton.
I know, I'm thinking. Oh. Yes.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
Yes.
Ms. Vanush.
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Yes.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
For the city of Fredericksburg, Mr. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Graham.
No.
Mr. Baroudi.
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
I abstain.
And Dr. Schneider.
Abstain.
The vote passes with 7 yeses and 2 nays.
Thank you, ma'am. I think that we are waiting for some additional information on why the bylaws change has to be on the UPWP. I've got to say, as a chair, I'm disappointed that this was not brought up before. We've had quite a few lively conversations about what should be in the bylaws, the reasons that we want to change, and it was very clear to everyone. And by God, I'm going to tell you, if you don't show up to this meeting next time, you're going to see me at your doorstep. And I probably can't say that, so I withdraw whatever I just said.
Cancel that.
Cancel that. So, but please, people, come on, let's behave so we can get through this bylaws discussion and change it. It's on the agenda. We could discuss it and talk about right now what we want to do related to the quorum. And I would still like to go ahead and do that, although we never were going to vote on it. We were never going to do anything. It says clearly it's a discussion. All right? We're not changing anything. We're discussing it. And so going back to our discussion about the quorum, if you will see that Ms. McClendon, our county attorney, provided some language with the intent. When I asked her for it, I said I was looking for something that would assume that you already had a quorum and you wanted to prevent it. Since then, or prevent losing it. And since then, some other individuals have proposed different other ideas, much simpler ways. Hey, they're not lawyers, so it's got to be simpler. No disrespect, Eric, but they're not. They're just simply changing some of the words. Might be able to meet that. I've talked about it with several different people. Would somebody please propose your idea besides me talking? I'm the chair. I don't want to be talking. I just want to be listening. Say it, Mr. Towery.
The one recommendation that our staff had made was to just simply simplify this by striking the requirement for a voting member from each jurisdiction be present for quorum, and that would still require a simple majority for quorum. So there's one line in there. If you can zoom in. Starts with at least one voting representative from each of Fredericksburg, Stafford County, and Spotsylvania County must be present to establish a quorum. Just simply striking that from the original language, and the remainder of Section 5 would stand. So
and add in a simple majority.
It would therefore just become a simple majority. The vacancies, as it previously stood, still talked about vacancies not affecting the majority, not counting towards the majority. So if you had vacancies within the FAMPO committee, those vacancies do not affect the ability to have quorum because it's still a 2/3. I think you have.
Mr. Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with regard to that potential recommendation, the only concern is then what would be stopping a majority of the board from, I guess, rescheduling a meeting to when another locality is holding its regular session, thereby forcing the members of the board to choose between attending their, Board of Supervisors or City Council meeting or the FAMPO meeting if this simple majority is required at all times.
That's interesting and nefarious. Anybody else have comments, questions about how to mitigate that? I don't think this way. It's interesting that you think that way.
Would this still require, sorry, Ms. Chair.
Go ahead.
Would this still require at least 2 localities to be? So like 2 localities, we'd have to have a simple majority. So 2 localities would still have to be on the call, correct?
To make that, yes. Because right now we have 11 voting members.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Kelly.
I'm not going to comment on this directly. Just a question. MPOs were established by federal law under federal guidelines to establish memberships. Has Federal Highway seen these changes yet? Have we confirmed that they are within the bounds, the legal bounds of what an MPO is supposed to have and do? If not, I would suggest that we do that first.
No, actually, they are. I can show you these, but I compared these to, I printed out 18 different MPOs and actually bylaws. Some of them are old bylaws and new bylaws, and compared them to what we had. There are so many different opportunities for what we would include in our bylaws, and you'll see that there's some comments about why do we even need, maybe it's Virginia, but why do we need any specific oversight on the bylaws as it is? And so we've never submitted things to Federal Highways before. We haven't had that, and I'm very curious on why suddenly it feels like we have to have all this additional oversight because we can't even do this ourselves. I don't understand that. We are elected officials across 3 counties, well, actually 4 counties, 1 city, and we seem to be having this challenge on just getting our normal organizational activities done. And I'm just curious on why do we have this problem? Is it because of COVID? What is going on here, guys? Why is
Because
this a
by state and federal law, they have a right of oversight over the expenditure of state and federal funding and how it is done and how it is administered. That is the nature of the game. And they do. I mean, you have in here taking out voting members for VDOT and PRTC, or it doesn't have to be PRTC, it has to be a transit agency. There are things in here that I know there are federal requirements for. I'm just asking, and I don't think you're going to make it too far if you just basically, I mean, all 3 jurisdictions need to be represented. To sit there and say just 2 can make decisions for the region, my guess is if it's not illegal, we'll be legally challenged.
Madam Chair, was there any other, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we're just talking about the quorum, Mr. Kelly. The rest of the items are discussion only for later on.
Madam Chair, was there in any of the other areas where you looked at other MPOs, was there any discussion such as this in any of those?
No, the only thing, about having a quorum, none. There was no MPO bylaws that I found that ever had an MPO, I guess, that had a situation where they had to address a loss of a quorum during a meeting.
It's not the question.
Which speaks volumes. This is a delaying tactic.
Yeah, but there were MPOs that did not have DOTs on their voting membership. There was only one MPO that I found that had more than one representative of a locality in that particular meeting, and I'm not talking about TPB. I'm talking about MPOs our size. I wasn't looking for the large UZA TPBs or TMAs. So having said that, just focusing on the quorum, where are we? Because I don't want to argue all night. Okay. Yeah, you can. I have the bylaws that are there. Are you bringing that up on a screen, or is that on?
I'm happy to share it if they'd like to see it.
Sure.
Adam, this is Jason. If everybody would like to see the simple sentence struck on Section 5 quorum, I'd be happy to send that to you right now, or put it up if you want me to present.
Yeah, Jason, this is Adam. You should be able to hit present from your computer. I can prompt you if you can't find the button.
Yeah, just give me a second. Okay, so the recommendation was just simply to leave everything else in the bylaws as is, and this one sentence right here, at least one voting member. I'm sorry, my stuff's getting in the way here. Let me move it off.
Nope.
I don't want to leave the meeting. Collapse. at least one voting representative from each from Fredericksburg, Stafford County, and Spotsylvania County must be present to establish a quorum. So that the recommendation then would be to remove that, and that would seem to fix the concern at hand. And I'll give the screen back, hopefully.
So, Madam Chair, would you just like for us to say, okay, we like that, let's bring this back? Once we get the decision on the UPWP changes, then I think that would determine what we have to put on the agenda for the next meeting, whether it needs to be advertised for 30 days, and then we could maybe bring this back when the 30-day time clock is run out for the bylaws.
I think that makes that's perfect sense for what we need to do going forward.
Okay.
I do. And so just having the discussion was all we needed to do. What do we think we need to do about the quorum? Knowing that we can't change anything, but we can at our next meeting, we can have that discussion. Okay. Any other comments or questions about the quorum?
Madam Chair.
Oh, Jason. Thank you, Jason.
Would you mind please making sure we each have a copy of that before the next meeting so that we can review it and also review it with our respective localities' attorneys as well?
Sure. And we will send this out today, right now.
Thank you so much.
It's actually in the packet.
No, I think he's talking
Well,
about
not the sentence as was constructed.
Yeah,
Correct.
the simple version. You're right. Thank you, sir. All right. Man, I'm tired of that.
Madam Chair,
Right.
question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Can you share, you mentioned that you took 18 different samples of MPOs.
Yes.
Could you share those with the rest of the group?
I can scan them in. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And it's going to be a lot. It's about 2.5 inches thick of paper. So welcome. It's okay. I don't mind. Not my
Can I make a
paper.
comment, Madam Chair? This is Adam.
Yes, sir.
If you want to provide that list to our staff, we'd be happy to collect electronic versions and then distribute that to the committee.
Oh, hell no. This is more fun this way. Thank you.
No.
All right. Thank you. Item number 9, correspondence. I don't want to go back and look for where the links are. So anyway, item number 9, correspondence. Do we have any correspondence that we need to present to the FAMPO Policy Committee tonight?
We do, Madam Chair, just 2 quick letters for appointments to the board. So this is for Mr. Graham and then for Dr. Schneider from PRTC. I did want to, Madam Chair, call back to the approved agenda with the item that you proposed, I believe, about VDOT and a meeting, and bring that back for the discussion section number 8.
Thank you. Before we go into staff and agency reports, I would like to add in that add-on here at this point of the meeting that occurred between Stafford County administration, Spotsylvania administration, I'm sorry, not administration, not the CEO. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, it's the chair of the board, and the mayor of Fredericksburg with VDOT. Marcy, could you give us an update on what action items that we need to take coming out of that meeting as FAMPO?
There were no action items that came out of that meeting. I had just gotten the chairs together along with our central office transportation planning division administrator, FHWA, and Dr. Millsaps, and we were just trying to build a better working relationship between the localities, the state, and FHWA. The chairs were going to go back and talk to their FAMPO representatives, and we were going to get together again in October to continue moving forward and have more discussions.
Thank you, ma'am. Were any FAMPO members included in this discussion?
No, ma'am. Except myself.
Okay. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to talk to the chairs of the boards of supervisors about just discussion of recent meetings of FAMPO and how all the counties and localities can agree to move forward. with a regional approach. This was not a FAMPO meeting. This was just a general county meeting.
About FAMPO, though. Okay. All right. I guess our chair will talk to us someday about this. I guess we look forward to having that conversation with Ms. Blomke. We have no plans right now to have that conversation. We were keeping it within the policy committee. So I wait to hear from other localities how they plan on handling that. And I'm sorry that there's no action items. I was hoping that there was something that we would learn from that. Any comments or questions about that meeting? Thank you. Really, I appreciate your concern. I just didn't quite understand it. So thank you very much. Next item is staff and agency reports, item 10. Do we have any staff and agency reports for tonight's meeting?
We do, Madam Chair. I'll keep this brief, but we have filled the public involvement coordinator position. So Stacy Feint has returned to our team and started today. So we're very excited about that. We also have hired 2 part-time interns for the fall semester. They have each started in the last couple weeks. So Mohammed Khan has just graduated from Indiana University and is starting his master's degree in urban and regional planning this fall. And Maggie Campbell is an upcoming 4th-year student at UVA studying urban and environmental planning, and she started with us last week. So we're very excited to have them on board.
You're right. We are. Welcome back, Stacy. That's awesome. The next item on the agenda are any board member and chair comments. I was going to ask for a roll call. I'm not sure that a lot of people are left. I don't know how many people are still left in the meeting. But Ms. Vigil, would you do a roll call for any board member and chair comments? I will not be making any comments.
Okay, I can start with Stafford County. I'll start with Mr. Dudenheffer.
I pass.
Ms. Vanush? Did you say you pass? Okay.
Yeah, defer. I don't have any comments.
Spotsylvania County, Mr. McLaughlin?
No comment.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Enough has been said.
Mr. Marshall?
No comment.
City of Fredericksburg, Mr. Kelly? Mr. Graham?
Pass.
Mr. Baruti?
No comments.
Ms. Parker?
No comments.
Dr. Schneider?
Pass.
Okay. That's it for the voting members. Do you want me to go through? Do you want member reports on everyone?
No, ma'am. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody's attendance to this meeting. We definitely have some controversial subjects. I like that. We have diversity in our group, and it's important for us to remember that collaboration and that regional feel. I want to appreciate Ms. Parker for reaching out in her way to try to find some solution to some of the challenges. I think as we turn over every rock and we understand things, that I think that we will all operate better. And I look forward to our next meeting, which when is our next meeting? It's October 19th at 7:15. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.